So this is the beginning of clip 3. We've got a little slight overlap here. So again, you're coming around the turn. Here's a really good place to see how far onto the wrong side of the river you would go if you went straight for the bridge. Some general coxing tips. Understand the boat. When you rudder, without making forward progress, if you're not going very fast, the rudder won't do a thing. So you need to have a certain amount of forward momentum for the rudder to help. If you're spinning with, if you're rowing with fewer than everybody rowing, the rudder doesn't do a whole lot. So just be aware it takes a while. And once you get a feel for steering, you're trying to rudder as little as you can. Okay, now we're approaching this bridge. Right hand is downstream, center arch is middle. Now understand that people are coming from Cambridge Boathouse, which is off to our left right now. They frequently, they're supposed to launch by going upstream, but they frequently launch downstream. Now if they're rowing straight across the river, and you see them here, before you get to the bridge, you see a boat going straight across the river, and beginning to go downstream, their plan is to come out into the center, stop, and wait for you to go by, usually. But it's impossible to guess whether they're actually going to stop or not. So you need to basically assume that they're not going to stop, and assume that they're cutting right in close to shore. You may need to stop. You may need to wane off here. It's a dangerous part of the river through this bridge. So, as we come around, this is again a huge turn. It's a very big turn, and it's very easy to move out toward the center. Also understand that boats doing head of the Charles pieces are coming upstream are going to be pushing the center line, so stay further right than you think you need to, especially if there's a boat trying to pass you. Trying to be considerate of boats trying to pass by staying close to shore. So at this point we're okay, into a new clip here. We're still going downstream. You're trying to stay as far right as you can around this turn. It's wide, but the problem is boats, a lot like the single, will be pushing the center line of the river as you come around it. If you're looking at a map of the Charles next to it, you'll notice that this is a much bigger turn than it feels like on the river. The turn just keeps going. It's a very significant turn. So after we get past the boathouse, past this turn, the Harvard Boathouse, Anderson, becomes visible. Anderson is on our right side. It's the men's boathouse. Before Anderson is another great place to wane off. Notice how these singles are pretty close to the center line. They're doing head of the Charles pieces. So at this point, your point is not for the bridge. If you went straight for the bridge again, you'd get too far to the center and you'd have to turn underneath it. There's a tower, a white tower right in front of you. If you're going through the bridge, that is your point. You're not aiming for the bridge yet. You'll make the turn for the bridge later than you think. That's the easiest way to describe resist the urge to make the turn. But here to the right is a good place to wane off before we get to the bridge. We may spin here. If you do spin here, understand that it's a wide part of the river. You may need to row straight across, or it may be faster to just have starboards row. It just depends on the day. There's lots of ways to turn, and there's no absolutely right rule. So at this point, you want to be actually further to the right than this launch is. Now understand, boats will be coming upstream through the center arch, so you need to stay pretty far right to be lined up to go straight through the right-hand arch. You need to avoid the center arch and go straight through the right-hand arch. The rule in the center arch is technically that you're only really supposed to go through it if there's a boat on the Weld Boathouse launching, but basically, for our purposes, the center arch is an upstream arch year-round. Only go through it when your coach says that you can. And you'll never go through it downstream unless the right-hand arch is blocked, which it has been recently. Alright, here, between the bridges, this is a tricky place. To the right is a bit of dead water. You can see that on the map. To the right, you can move over a little bit closer to shore, though don't get too close to shore, it's very rocky, and wane off. If you're going straight through this next arch, your goal is pretty much the center of the center arch. Aim for the pretty much the center of the center arch of Weeks for now. You don't want to be too close to shore, and you don't want to be aimed for the bridge. Basically, it's just like driving a car. If you've got a big turn and you move away from the turn before you approach it, you can start the turn early and be part way through changing the angle of the boat before you actually get to it. So you're still aimed maybe for the arch here, resisting the urge to aim for the bridge. Don't aim for the bridge quite yet. And if now you can start to make the turn. If you start to make the turn now, you've got maybe 2 or 3 strokes of turning before you actually get to it, which is important after Weeks footbridge. As you come straight through here, you'll notice that if you're going straight, you're going totally in the wrong direction. You need to have made the turn mostly already. You need to have made the turn to be close to the shoreline, otherwise you're off into the center of the river, which is right where boats that are making fairly bad head of the Charles courses turns are going to be, but that's most boats in the fall. Most boats know that they need to go through the center arch on the head of the Charles, and they come way too close to the Boston shore, the center line beforehand. So at this point, we're going to spin. We're not going to go through these next 2 bridges. The only thing you need to know is right-hand arch on each of them in each direction. We're not going to go through the center arch ever unless your coach tells you to. Center arch is upstream for the head of the Charles, and the rules are more complicated than you need to know to Coxford GS2, but the simple rule is you're never going to go through this upstream arch, the center arch, unless your coach tells you to. And they change directions. So, we're going to spin in a second here and go back upstream.